The halo has slipped for Saint Keir Starmer. Our holier-than-thou, soon-to-be Prime Minister endlessly preaches about how he locked up dangerous criminals as Director of Public Prosecutions. But sadly, that's not the full story. The cervix-free leader of the opposition, famous for his wildly poor political judgment, campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. He backed a second Brexit referendum. He called for more needless and failed lockdowns, saying he'd rather be with the globalist elite in Davos, Switzerland, than in Westminster. It goes on and on and on. Blimey, I would never go to the races with this guy because he always backs the wrong horse. But whilst in my view he has a history of political misjudgment, in a cracking piece of journalism by the Sun newspaper and their top hacks, Harry Cole and Thomas Godfrey, his moral virtue and certainly his professional ethics are brought into question, as it's revealed that Starmer worked for free as a lawyer for many years to help scores of twisted killers around the world, including a monster who buried his 2-year-old stepchild alive. Now, Starmer supporters will argue this was part of a 20-year legal strategy across the world to get rid of the death penalty. Although why you'd want to preserve the lives of some of the worst human beings the world has ever seen is beyond me. But the Sun have done a deep dive into his legal career and identified multiple sick criminals who reduced their sentences, including Jamaican Lambert Watson, who slaughtered his girlfriend and 9-month-old baby by stabbing them in the neck. Charming. He helped a Malawian murderer who tied up his 2-year-old stepson before burying him alive. And how about the Ugandan axe murderer who slayed his girlfriend in front of her children? Now, barristers operate under what is referred to as the cab rank rule, where they take the next available case that's given to them and serve their clients without fear or favour. By sometimes defending dreadful people, lawyers are simply doing their job and serving justice. But as top barrister Stephen Barrett points out on Twitter today, these are political choices that Sir Keir made as part of a private political campaign. Now, Starmer's people will argue he took no money to represent these people. Well, I think that makes it worse. His defenders say on social media that the convictions against the aforementioned monsters were unsafe because of a lack of legal representation or due process. But the reality is that these monsters, whose crimes are far too egregious to even imagine, they were helped by Starmer, whose brand is all about being the sharing, caring former human rights lawyer. Did he spare a thought for the human rights of the victims of the post office scandal when he failed to intervene in the prosecution of innocent sub-postmasters when he was director of the public prosecutions? I don't think so. So, Starmer sells himself as the good guy. But with this story, I think we've seen the good, the bad and the ugly. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. To react to all of that, I'm delighted to welcome GB News star Nana Akua, former Environment Secretary, Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Well, there you go. Are you surprised to hear about Keir Starmer's back catalogue of misjudgment?
Well,
Nana?
this is the man who presided over the DPS during the whole issue with Jimmy Savile. Obviously, he had no connection with it in that respect, no direct connection with it, but he did head up the division. There's no question about that. But my problem with this is you have this wokerati, these woke so-called do-gooders who are going to help people and so on and so forth. He had a choice as to whether he was going to work with these people, and he chose to do it. If he were a business, then the advertisers would be withdrawing their advertising, because that's how the world is. And I just find it incredible that literally every call he keeps making is wrong, and I'd be afraid to have somebody like that leading this country. It's frightening, the people that he's represented. And yes, he may have been thinking he's doing a good thing by helping mass murderers so that they don't face the full force of what he believes maybe is an inhumane punishment. But at the end of the day, whose side is he on? If you give it to me, I'll be the one who presses the button and allows this death penalty to happen. I would actually bring it back. He doesn't understand the environments that he's dealing in Africa and other places where a lot of it is more brutal and more barbaric. He should stay out of it.
I've got to say, I think you'd make a charming executioner. I think if you had to go death by Nana, sign me up. Rebecca, do you care to make the case for the defence?
I think it shows how desperately sad and scared a lot of people are of Keir Starmer. There are so many legitimate criticisms of him as a leader of the opposition. I'm frustrated by him in lots of ways. This looks pathetic. This was his job. He openly and clearly believes that the death penalty is wrong. That is his choice. I understand that not everybody feels that way, but Commonwealth countries, that what he was trying to do is bring Commonwealth countries in line with the UK policy where there is no death penalty. Now, that means that there is no death penalty for anyone, no matter how evil they are. All he was doing is trying to overturn the death penalty. That is a perfectly reasonable, legitimate aim. And to use such emotive language to start digging up cases of times where he had to do that in order to get rid of the death penalty or help get rid of the death penalty, it's manipulative and it's childish and it's a bit pathetic. And moreover, one of the great things about this country is our justice system. The post office scandal obviously doesn't speak well of it, but broadly speaking, the right to a fair trial is a beautiful and magical and important thing, and you cannot have that unless you have people willing to defend anybody. The way that you get people in prison is by having good, proper lawyers defending anybody and everybody, so that you can't then overturn trials by suggesting there was no defence.
Well,
that is what Keir Starmer did.
What about his moral compass, though? Because even if I was doing that, I would be somebody who'd say, look, I'm not going to represent people like that. But then my own moral compass.
But then I would be the same, so I would be a terrible barrister. I couldn't be a lawyer because I'd be like, oh, I think you seem like.
But you were saying he was doing his job, but he did this.
He didn't have to do that.
Right, you were saying
he did have to.
You said
his job.
No, you said he was doing his job, but he did this unpaid. This was a political project.
These are two different things. There have been multiple stories about him to do with this. One of them is that he represented unsavoury people in the UK, and one of them is that he helped represent people abroad when he was trying to overturn the death penalty. Now, on the former point, that was his job, he had to do it. On the latter point, he felt the death penalty was wrong. I feel that we might not all agree on that. Personally, I'm anti-death penalty, even for people I personally would like to push on.
Yeah, but with that in mind, Rebecca, if somebody said to you, OK, you don't have to do this, but would you represent this mass murderer?
I think for him, the general...
No, but if it was you, I'm asking you, if it was you wouldn't do it, would you?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be a very bad person to do it because I'm very ill-qualified, but I believe sufficiently in the death penalty being wrong that I would agree that even people who murder children shouldn't be put to death.
But would you do it, though? Because even if I believe...
Would I stand up in court and defend somebody? Yeah. I think I'd be more likely to end up...
Briefly, Rebecca, I need to come to Ranil, but what about the fact that the actions of Sir Keir Starmer saw some of these monsters leave jail early, shorter sentences?
The sentence that we were looking at was 19 years, and the guy in question was high on drugs and had some very significant... was not within their mental state.
But he still committed murder.
Oh no, he's still an evil piece of... He's still an evil piece of word, I won't say.
So he shouldn't get out early because he was taking drugs.
But fundamentally, 19 years is a very long sentence.
OK.
This is
Ranil, over to you.
This is just a glimpse, though, of what a future Labour government would be. You know, I actually have to say I think Rebecca's right in terms of everyone deserves to have legal representation. I get that. He's made a choice here.
Yeah.
And let's set the death penalty aside for a second. He's made a choice here that he wanted to run a political campaign when he was paid by the taxpayer as Director of Public Prosecutions. I think there are questions about that. I think he's chosen to run that political campaign instead of defending the sub-postmasters, because he should have used his spare time when he was DPP to maybe look at some of the cases going on in this country for which he was paid.
But Commonwealth.
Hang on. He was paid to do Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales. That was his job, and he didn't do it. But also, it's you know, frankly, it's not for Britain to decide. And I don't think it's right for the Director of Public Prosecutions for this country to decide what another country's judicial system should or should not have as a penalty. We might have our own views. We might have our own views on all sorts of things. But it's for any other country to make their own decisions.
Briefly, is it not nice to have a potential Prime Minister with deep principles? That's what Rebecca would argue.
Well, deep principles of allowing our sub-postmasters to go to prison so that you could save other people from prison.
I don't think he was aware of that.
And indeed, you know, if you look at some of the other statements he's made as a politician, he wants to bring back new court cases for veterans who served in Northern Ireland.
It's not
repealing that legislation.
Briefly, Rebecca.
I don't think you can reasonably say that everything that happened while he was working as Director of Prosecutions ends with him, in the same way that you can't say that everything that happened under the Prime Minister, not everything that happened when David Cameron was Prime Minister.
Well, they were quite happy to cascade Boris for everything that happened under his watch.
Who is they? I'm not.
Well, most people, everyone would blame
that doesn't work either.
David.
You cannot blame one person for everything that happens underneath.
You're in charge of it.